US Vice President Kamala Harris has passed the threshold to clinch the Democratic presidential nomination in a vote of party delegates. Harris said she was honoured to be the presumptive nominee. Meanwhile, there's a dispute between the two candidates over their first head-to-head debate, with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris each in favour of a different broadcaster on a different date. Meanwhile, at a rally in Atlanta last night, the Republican nominee Donald Trump doubled down on mocking Kamala Harris's name. Well, that was Donald Trump last night. David Charter is the Times assistant US editor. Good evening to you, David.
Hello, Carol from Washington, D.C.
Oh, well, Donald Trump there essentially seems to be at the moment focusing on personal attacks on his main rival.
Yeah, he's trying every which way, actually. But you're right. In the last few days, we've seen him get really personal. He's tried a bit of race baiting. He went into a convention of black journalists and wondered aloud whether Kamala Harris was really black, because he'd only heard that recently and thought she was Indian. No doubt trying just to stir up a little bit of perhaps suspicion among voters about her racial identity and whether she adopts different demeanors to suit different audiences. That was perhaps his goal, but I think it backfired. There's been a resounding outcry, certainly from the black journalists, but across the board, really. Even, I would say, among a lot of Republicans, and are very uneasy about this line of attack, especially when Republicans think, and I think rightly, that Kamala Harris is really vulnerable on some big issues, notably the border, where she was asked by President Biden to look into and to slow down the surge of people coming through Central America. And she failed completely. It was the border had the highest number of arrivals in 2023 on record. And so she's got policy problems, and yet Trump does what Trump does. Perhaps a sign that he's a little bit rattled, and he feels the need personally to just take it out on her character.
And in the meantime, there's this row going on now about when and where the two rivals should debate one another, because Joe Biden, after he pulled out, Donald Trump is saying, right, well, we can now have a different debate on Fox News. And Kamala Harris is saying, no, well, we've already got a date in the diary.
Yeah, well, so what was really going on there, Carol, yesterday when Trump said, I've agreed that we'll have a debate on September the 4th on Fox News, was Donald Trump's way of pulling out of the debate with Kamala Harris that had already been agreed with the Biden campaign, of course, for September the 10th with ABC News. So Trump's own campaign had agreed all this, but he would rather it was conducted by Fox News, more in his comfort zone, a conservative network. Harris has called this out for what it is. That's Trump backing away from an agreement, although the agreement was made with the Biden campaign. So you can sort of pick your side on this one. Presumably, they will eventually debate, especially if the polling continues to be neck and neck, because really it would only be in Trump's interest to avoid a debate if he was a good few points ahead and only had ground to lose, I think.
And of course, it could be crucial, couldn't it? I mean, we only have to look at what happened when Joe Biden and Donald Trump had their debate. And of course, Joe Biden lost his way, lost his track, couldn't seem to remember what he was talking about. And that was the beginning of the end of his bid for the White House. So these events do matter, don't they?
Oh, tremendously. And that, of course, was a debate with the hated CNN liberal network that Trump is always criticizing. And it was on the terms that were largely set by the Biden campaign. I mean, they ensured that the microphones would be switched off when the rival who wasn't speaking was not due to speak, to stop him to stop one person interrupting the other. We know what they were trying to do, because of the debates in 2020 was a total mess with Trump interrupting numerous times. And so it was all on Biden's terms, and of course it was a disaster for him. He totally flunked it. Um,
These things are so much more carefully controlled there in the US than they are here in Britain. And I think, in a way, we get rather more free flowing debates in the UK as a result. I did just want to ask you, though, David, about Kamala Harris's choice of vice president, the Veep question. We're hearing that she's actually been interviewing potential candidates this weekend. And this is being seen as really important, isn't it? In getting someone in place who can perhaps complement her appeal to voters and maybe get on board some of those who might be wary about voting for her as president.
yes, I mean, once we get into the policy debate and Trump drops or maybe sidelines the personal attacks, the Republican side is going to portray her as very left wing, because she took some very left wing positions in 2019 when she tried to become the presidential candidate, signing up for the Green New Deal. This trillions of dollars spent on climate mitigation, and Medicare for all, which is a horrific socialist plot, according to Republicans, for taxpayer-funded health service. So those positions, she has backed away from them. But once we get into that, she perhaps will need to have a VP, a running mate, who is seen as more moderate and can reach more centrist voters who are confused about who to vote for in the 2024 election. Believe it or not, there are still 4 or 5% apparently of people who are undecided. That had come right down when it was Trump and Biden. People really were making up their minds, but there's more in play now. And so if she chooses one of the top candidates, they're all white men, by the way, who are under consideration. The Democrats have decided not to challenge voters with 2 women or with 2 people of color. And so it looks like she may go for a governor, because let's face it, Kamala Harris doesn't have any governing experience beyond her years as vice president, when her main record is, certainly according to the Republicans, is failure on the border. But there's also a prominent senator from Arizona called Mark Kelly, a former astronaut and space shuttle commander. He's still in the mix. He would bring perhaps that border state of Arizona, again, perhaps helping to mitigate some of Harris's weakness on the border with voters. But he's also a pretty centrist character, like the 2 main governors, Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and Tim Walz of Minnesota.